Hey, everybody. Hope you're having a good Labor Day. I am Chief Meteorologist Leslie Hudson with my radar. It's just right at 7 p.m. straight up, or it's about a minute away from that. I want to thank you guys for joining us on our YouTube live update with Dorian. And of course, hope some folks are trying to salvage their Labor Day weekend when we've got this menacing hurricane off in the distance. So I'm going to break everything down. We got some new info, some new steering analysis I'm going to try and talk about as well. But I wanted to real quick show you some of the video that I've gotten in from Aaron J. Jack, our storm chaser. So I got to look over my shoulder here real quick, and I'm going to show you this. This was in Melbourne. Now, this was about, about an hour ago, and definitely seeing some rough, nasty weather there. And of course, only going to get worse as we get into the next several hours as Dorian gets closer to Florida. It's not actually expected to get near where Aaron is until sometime on Wednesday, even maybe late on Tuesday, tomorrow night, but it's going to be a while, you guys. So we're going to see these squalls coming in, some of these outer bands, and it's going to continue to be a rough go for a lot of folks here in the coming days and ahead. So another vantage point here from our own Seth Deckard, capturing some of the crews getting ready to help people get back online when their power is knocked out. We are anticipating that to happen, even though we are expecting Dorian not to directly make landfall over Florida. When you've got tropical storm winds and hurricane force winds sustained for hours and hours, we will likely see several areas without power in Florida. Hopefully not too much, but it's always great to see the crews getting ready from all over the country. They come, you guys, to help a state out in need, and it's really nice to see. We've seen them all over in Central Florida. Here's a look at what's going on along the beaches. Now, you may know that turtle nesting season is going on right now in Florida, and of course, it's always a major concern for the turtles this time of the year, and how they'll handle all of what hurricanes can bring. So hopefully those little guys and gals will be okay. There's a lot of folks looking out for those turtles. Sometimes they actually will move the nests if they're that concerned that they will not be able to withstand a hurricane. So I'm not sure what's going on there, but glad to see that there is already signs up, and I know that there are people that are loyal turtle enthusiasts, and that will hopefully keep those little guys safe from Dorian. All right, so let's talk about Dorian and what happened today. And if you've been watching, and I'm sure you have, all the country seems to be focused on this hurricane. We've seen yet again another stall, and completely stalled Dorian over the Grand Bahama Island, and that is the absolute worst case scenario for those folks, of course. And if you've been jumping on social media, you may have seen some of the video there. Their storm surge has been just as catastrophic as Abaco. So Abaco had a storm surge about 23 feet, but it looks like the storm surge in Grand Bahama was anywhere from 8 to 20 feet. And we just posted on our social, on Facebook, and I think I put it on Twitter too, their ministry, their agricultural minister was huddled in his home, and he was 20 feet up, and the wall of storm surge was crashing on the sides of his windows. It's crazy video. You can see it on our Twitter page and on our Facebook page too, and I'll show you those handles if you don't know them. But so again, that's the worst scenario for those islands, and the worst of the fury of this hurricane has happened in that area of the Bahamas, and we think that we're keeping our fingers crossed that it looks like Dorian has maxed out in intensity with those phenomenal and astronomical winds at 185 miles an hour. It is weaker today, thankfully, and I don't see indications where it would have time to get stronger. I've had a lot of questions. Is it getting stronger? Will it get stronger? Probably not. That is not likely. It's not in the forecast. It's interacting with Florida and is expected to continue to interact with Florida for the next 2 to 3 days. So that direct interaction, the analogy I use, pretend this is Dorian's outer wall, and this is the state of Florida, or this is the state of Florida, and this is like sandpaper. So as this cotton ball, if you will, rotates, cotton ball being the clouds of Dorian, rotates around that friction, it's very hard for the core of that hurricane to stay intact. So I'm not anticipating Dorian to re-strengthen even as it moves into the Gulf Stream. That's been a question I've been getting a lot. And then, of course, a lot of folks asking, why is it stalled? Why isn't it moving? And why are the forecasts wrong? The forecasts aren't wrong. This has been an extremely tough hurricane to predict. One of the things that I keep telling you all about is the modeling. The technology is not in place to forecast in advance steering currents that collapse or hurricanes that don't perform to those said steering currents. So it was not it was in the forecast from the Hurricane Center that Dorian would slow down significantly, which it did. Remember, it was moving west around 7 miles an hour on top end after it moved over near Puerto Rico. And then now it is completely stalled, not moving over Grand Bahama, which is where Freeport is. And that's the 100% worst case scenario for Grand Bahama. There's going to be a lot of aid that's going to be needed for those areas of the Bahamas. So once we're done talking about Dorian in the headlines, I hope a lot of folks that watch and I've been watching coverage with us and other outlets will try and do what they can to help send relief to those islands. It will be years before they will come out of this. It's a really, really sad scenario. So anyway, stalled and out over just right over Grand Bahama. But what I was talking about in my, actually I got to start this up. What I was talking about in my update with Facebook that I just did is that there's definitely some wobbling going on with the hurricane. So as we get zoomed way in here, I'm going to grab my pointer and it'll help illustrate what I'm talking about. So you see how it's kind of just wobbling around. Here is Grand Bahama, Freeport down here, and you can see the eye just kind of oscillating up and then down and up and down and not even moving. It's just the worst scenario for these people. I just hate it for these islands. They're so lovely. If you've never been there, one of my favorite places in the world is the Bahamas, and I just hate to see this. But unfortunately, it's expected to stay stalled for the remainder of tonight. We should start to see some forward momentum, a west to northwesterly movement by tomorrow, and then that turn more towards the north will be gradual, but that should start to happen on Tuesday and Wednesday as well. So people are saying, oh, you said it's going to turn, it hasn't turned. Well, yeah, we've been saying the turn's going to be either tonight or Tuesday. And again, Dorian kind of throwing another wrench in the forecast here by stalling completely. So the timing is going to be off, you guys. So now we could be talking a later time in the forecast where we're going to see the turn. So the turn is forecast to happen tomorrow. If Dorian stays stalled longer, then that turn will be more delayed. But I'm going to show you why I'm feeling really good about what I see in the atmosphere and getting this thing out of here. But let me show you, or at least hopefully moving. So let me show you here real quick. So about 140 miles or so, tropical storm force winds extend out. So we're definitely getting some feeder bands through the Palm Beaches and through the Treasure Coast that are getting winds around 40, I would imagine, or 45 miles an hour, if not greater. And then the hurricane force winds are about 90 miles out. So that's about right in here, but that does not mean that they're getting hurricane winds in Florida, in Palm Beach County right now. So the core winds, remember, it's structured on the right hand side of the vortex. So all of those powerful winds, high winds, are on the northeast. The southeast quadrant, southwest quadrant are the weaker side of hurricanes. And so I would imagine they've had some pretty decent squalls down there in South Florida for sure. And parts of South Florida are under a tropical storm warning because the winds are expected very close to tropical storm strength as Dorian just sits there and just rotates off the coast and just creates an ominous picture, of course, for the folks in South Florida. This is not the first time we've seen a hurricane do this. We know that in recent history, of course, a lot of talk has been about Hurricane Matthew and how it did a lot of damage actually to Florida, and it never made landfall in Florida. It moved north, but it definitely created some serious situations for the state of Florida, and I'm anticipating some of that for Florida, especially along the coastline where there's the hurricane warning. I am anticipating winds to be hurricane strength in parts of Brevard County, parts of Indian River, St. Lucie, and maybe Martin. We'll see once this turn happens. But earlier today, I forgot to mention this when I was on that tight infrared. Let me see if I can go back to it. Without messing up my machine. Okay, so earlier today, Dorian underwent an eye placement recycle. We've talked about that. So it's kind of like a chameleon, or actually it's kind of like a snake or a lizard shedding its skin, or a butterfly or a caterpillar that kind of goes into its cocoon and reemerges a different animal, so to speak. So what happens when this eye wall replacement is sometimes in hurricanes, the eye wall itself can elongate and get larger. And the eye did get bigger with Dorian. So it was originally about 12 miles across, and now it's about I think it's about 26 the last I looked. So I'm getting a really crude estimate here, but it's about 26 miles across. So it did elongate. That does not mean that the 145 mile per hour winds now extend out to 26 miles versus 12 miles. Those 145 mile per hour winds are still tied up in that northeast quadrant. That doesn't change, but it does expand the wind field. It does expand the overall structure of the hurricane, and that does mean there's more of a direct impact. And speaking of which, let me show you. I got to turn back over here. We're still setting stuff up here, but I wanted to show you this 3D scan again, because this is a really excellent depiction of the structure of this hurricane. So if you watched me the last 2 days I've been showing this, you can see those intense reds and that texturing that looks in, the texturing in those clouds, which are about 50 to 60,000 feet up in the atmosphere. It is a textbook. At this point, this was still category, what time did I take this? 3 or 4 o'clock today. So it was still a category 4, but I mean, it is a textbook feature here that you see with that banding as those deep reds rotate into the center of the vortex there. And it's thermal imagery. So this is the GOES 16 visible imagery, and it's a scan every 15 minutes, high resolution, high def resolution. That we didn't have this technology, you guys, just 2 years ago, before GOES 16 was operational. GOES East it was. So, or GOES R, I'm sorry. So now we have this technology that can really clearly show this amazing structure of this hurricane and the intensity, and that black that you saw there and that northeastern side, those were those winds that are 145. And yesterday when I was showing this to you guys, it was 185. So the analysis from the infrared really helps us kind of dissect the structure of the hurricane, which is incredibly organized. So here's a look at the watches and warnings. The hurricane warnings were extended a bit up into Volusia County. As of this advisory, our hurricane watches were extended rather up to the state line of Georgia and Florida. And then we have tropical storm warnings for much of inland Central Florida and South Florida. And then we also have a tropical storm warning for Palm Beach County, and now a tropical storm watch up for eastern Broward County and offshore across Miami-Dade. And there's now a flooding concern up in Volusia County and northeastern Florida for the threat of these bands of rain, which will likely bring in some flooding problems for some people. So I'll look at the radar and satellite 24 hours in a loop here. I like to see the kind of the genesis in the last 24 hours to see some of the features, and definitely have seen some structural nuances with this vortex, with the eye, which I'm calling the vortex because it's basically a tornado that's been moving, that eye that's been moving over Grand Bahama. We talked about that yesterday too. That's basically an EF, well, it was yesterday an EF4, likely now like an EF3 that's just sitting there over the Bahamas. It's just, it's hard to put your brain around the level of devastation that those poor people in that island are experiencing because this hurricane is stalled. Now, I keep forgetting that I have this in there here. So that was that 3D imagery I just showed you, but it's a visible imagery. So the sun's obviously going down. So I meant to take this out, but you can see that cool spike there. That's the northeastern flank there of those 145 winds. And then I do a complete rotation of Florida just to kind of look at the overall structure. But it's such an incredible tool. We're really fortunate that we have that kind of data that we can share with you all, because it helps really look at some of this analysis. So again, another clear feature here is that eye, much larger, a lot more ragged, not tightly wound like that buzzsaw we saw yesterday. And this is likely due to the upwelling, likely due to the fact that it's been interacting with the Bahamas for the last 2 days, and it's starting to interact with Florida, and that will also greatly help us out in Florida in terms of the structure. Here's a way I can get a good estimate here of the eye. So this is, again, kind of rough. Yeah, about 25 across, 25, 26 across. But see how some of the structure here is not so symmetrical. Yesterday, it was perfect, textbook, classic category 5. And so we're seeing some rigidity here. We're not seeing a complete banding on this concentric banding here. So see how it doesn't go yellow all the way around where those really intense winds are. We still have some really intense winds up in here. These are all category 3, category 4 winds up in here. But the structural, and look, we've got a little bit of a drier entrainment right here. The structure of the actual hurricane is starting to be compromised a bit. and if we want that, we definitely don't want this thing getting any stronger. So that's all good. And now that it's close enough to ground-based radar, we can really kind of dissect that and that core there and see how it's interacting, and just little nuances in the actual core of that system when it gets a little burst of dry air that moves in, or one of the feeder bands kind of rotates over land. You can see those really, really clearly as well. And the path as of 5 o'clock didn't change all that much. There was a slight shift back towards the east, but still close enough that we're still most of the immediate coastline of Florida is in play as from Melbourne northward, but a lot of Florida was taken in the clear today, which was great news. And it's also encouraging to see that Dorian is expected to continue to weaken. So I don't anticipate that hurricane to get any stronger. I think it maxed out at 185, which was enough. And the other good thing that I've seen today in the forecast is how fast this moves. So it's unfortunately going to be dealing with Florida and unleashing a lot of problems for Florida for 2 days. But then look at this, by Thursday, from Wednesday to Thursday, it's already up into South Carolina. And then by Friday, it's already up into the offshore of the Delmarva. And then by Nova Scotia, Saturday. So this thing is going to be booking. And again, the forecast track, when I'm looking at this and I see a lot of people saying it's not going to turn, it's not going to turn. It is going to turn, because this trough that I'm going to show you is going to pick it up and just jet it out into hopefully the ocean and no direct landfall. So that would be the best case scenario. It's going to be very close. That I know, and everybody knows. So how close, we're still not sure, but we do think that the core dangerous winds should stay off the coast of Florida. Here's a new product that I built for you guys today. Probability of 40 mile per hour winds or greater. You can see pick a city there if you want. I just toggled on about 8 of them in Florida, and I'll move it up into Georgia on Thursday when you guys are going to be dealing with it more, and then the Carolinas after that. But since Florida is going to be dealing with this for the longest right now, this is the probability that you're going to get winds greater than 40. So Miami about 26% chance, a 10% chance for Fort Pierce, but then you see everything bump up to around 50% chance for Orlando that you're going to get winds greater than 40 miles per hour. About 80% or 77% Daytona Beach is going to get winds higher than that. Same thing for Jacksonville, but I expect those numbers in Jacksonville, by the way, to go up once it gets closer. Another new product I'm going to use, I was showing you today, and I know that it's looks the hurricane itself looks a little rudimentary. I know it looks kind of like a cartoon, but that's the data that we got from our vendor. But at any rate, you can ignore that if you think it looks childish, but it's valid data. That's the structure of the hurricane as of this advisory, and the intense major hurricane winds you see shaded, that white on the right-hand side of the eye, again, would stay nowhere near Florida, which is good. But the winds could be estimated. This is Wednesday morning, about 3:35 in the morning, about 40 mile per hour winds sustained in Orlando, for about 43 Melbourne, about 63 Daytona. But this was up to 77. I think if I move it, oh, now that's a new model. So it's actually backed it down a little more. So last time I looked at this within this hour, it had Daytona up to around 77, and then Jacksonville and Savannah around 35, around 40 to 50. So that's just a guidance. It's not, again, what's going to happen, but it's a good guidance. And that's why many areas are under the tropical storm warning. And then while other areas are under the hurricane warning. Storm surge will be almost the entire state of Florida, or at least from Deerfield Beach north, all the way up into Brunswick. A storm surge of 4 to 7 feet is possible within these next 48 hours. We've already seen the push of water, onshore flow, filling up some of the canals I saw in Vero Beach today. I saw some flooding there. I know other canals and tributaries and rivers are getting pushed with that flow that directly feed into the Atlantic. So I expect to see more flooding problems. A possibility of a surge of 2 to 4 feet is the areas you see shaded in pink. And then this is another example, same thing, inundation, flooding, but I got to zoom way in here. And I'm going to take a quick jog up the coast here. So get your bearings. So I'm in Hope Sound, which is down in South Florida, near in the Treasure Coast area. So as we kind of scoot up the road here along I-95, A1A, US 1, we're still looking around 1 to 3 feet for the most part. Again, certainly going to be a change and going to be an increase, but manageable for the most part. But there will be some spots that are going to flood for sure. If you live in a flood-prone area, you're going to see some flooding with this kind of inundation. So we'll get closer to Vero. That's again on average 3 feet, 1 to 3 feet. Some of the yellows here. Let me pull this out a little bit. and we'll kind of jog up the road here. 1 to 3 feet for the most part. I'm going to kind of speed up till I get into Brevard because this is where it changes. So for the most part, so this is Merritt Island and the Kennedy Space Center over in here. They're expecting 3 feet as well. Yesterday, the surge was originally thought to be around 3 to 6, but the modeling has backed off a little bit, likely because Dorian still not a 5, and it's not going to be hopefully getting that close to Florida where we'd see a bigger push of the water. But look at that inland, New Smyrna Beach and St. John's River and down in through here, some of these larger rivers and lakes will be getting a push as well. Here you can see we're in Crescent City, and look at this. Look how far from the coast we are, and we could see a 3-foot surge here. So areas that are, if you've lived here for any length of time, and I'm a native, you know that when you get a hurricane, you can get this inland flooding from just the storm surge, even though you're not it's not the storm surge itself. It's the onshore flow, I should say. I should correct myself. But it's definitely something that's going to be creating some problems as we head up the coast. And then Georgia now, I'm in Georgia. Let me pull this out a little bit. And then we've got 3 to 6 feet here. I expect this to actually get a little higher when Dorian pulls northward, depending on the exact track. But we talked about yesterday the trajectory or the angle that Dorian comes in. So if this is the United States and Dorian comes up from this, remember that core wind field up here in the northeast quadrant pushes, basically it's just, again, a big shovel that shoves all that onshore flow, all that onshore wind across the Carolinas. So I am still thinking we're going to get a surge there that's higher than reflected here. But this may be today's model run may be because the track is further to the east, and that's compensating for the lack of direct interaction. We'll see. So stick around and we'll get you updated on the storm surge for those states in the coming days. Hurricane warnings. All the areas you see shaded in red, basically from Jacksonville south to Jupiter. A hurricane watch extends now up to Georgetown in South Carolina. We also have a tropical storm warning for that little tip of South Florida. This is at the coast, and then there is tropical storm warnings also, of course, for many parts of inland Florida. I showed you that at the top, and then we have a tropical storm watch, and I'll show you those warnings one more time. Okay, so here, I forgot to update this. So here's why I'm thinking, feeling pretty confident in what's going on with Dorian. So the fact that we've got this massive trough, and this is the water vapor. So this indicates the dry air. All that brown you see there is dry air in the atmosphere. Let me erase that. And then behind it is the trough that's digging down aggressively across parts of the central U.S. So it's still right about in here, basically, but then it's pushing south. So we've got this channel and this ridge, and I've got to redraw this because this ridge is actually further out this way. But the ridge, again, moving east, away from the United States, kind of opening up that gate to let Dorian pull north. And then we got this ridge that's coming down like a giant shovel. And bulldozer was the analogy I used yesterday. It's coming down, and Dorian can sense and interacts with that differing low pressure, and it's like, okay, I'm out of here, and it will start to turn. So I'm seeing much more clearly on the vapor this trough digging in, and so all guidance is in alignment too that the turn happens. You guys, I know people are scared because it's so close to Florida, but when you look at that water vapor, it's very clear. If you are a meteorologist or maybe if you're even an enthusiast, you can see clearly that trough digging down that will help guide Dorian away from Florida. Here's a look at the wind radii. I'll quickly go through this. And again, those tropical storm winds kind of raking up the coastline of Florida. I kind of, the analogy I've also been using, people that live in the interior parts of the state have been asking me, what can I expect? In Haines City was a question I got. Gainesville, another part was Orlando. So think of this. So a severe thunderstorm anywhere in the country has to have winds greater than 58 miles an hour. Right? So when you get a severe thunderstorm, the winds are really bad. So think of a hurricane that's going to bring tropical storm force winds to your area, not for 30 minutes like a severe thunderstorm. We're talking hours, 6 hours, 12 hours, 18 hours. In our particular scenario with Dorian's going to be interacting with Florida the longest of any of the states in this particular forecast. So Florida will feel the impacts, even though not as severe as originally thought, but will feel them the longest. So prolonged winds, even in 40-mile-per-hour winds, for hours and hours for 2 days at a time can cause some power outages. I mean, I'm expecting to see that. Vulnerable tree limbs will fall on power lines. We're expecting to see that to happen because even though the winds won't be as high as, say, a Hurricane Charlie or Hurricane Irma or whatever the hurricane, the fact that it's going to be so close to Florida and interacting with Florida for such a substantial amount of time, I do expect to see some power outages, even with the tropical storm influx. So I don't expect widespread power outages, but I do think we're going to see that happen. So you got to be prepared that even though we may not just get a glancing blow from this hurricane, and again, that's going to be fine-tuned here in these hours and the next day or so. But on the current scenario and what I'm thinking tonight, I do think that we'll see some vulnerabilities for the power grids in the state of Florida. There's a look at the models, and again, tightly clustered because everything's lining up with that trough coming in. The unknowns is how the timing of that trough, and again, the interaction with it and what's up the road, which is North Carolina and South Carolina. The current scenario, again, clustered, what could be very close to the barrier islands of North Carolina. So the folks in North Carolina and South Carolina still need to be making the preps. Obviously, no one can sign off on saying, hey, you're not going to get this. It's going to head out to sea. But we definitely do see the trending in at least these runs today. Much more in agreement. Remember yesterday, the models were kind of split like this. They're all like this for the most part, which is good. All right, life-threatening storm surge. Even a 4 to 7 foot storm surge is life-threatening if you don't evacuate and you're in a mandatory evacuation zone. Think about this. Your roof in your house is about 8 to 10 feet high. A storm surge is 7 feet, which is forecast for some parts of Florida. That's above your head, unless you're a basketball player, right? That's above your head. So you've got to really listen to your emergency management and your local officials. Heed the warnings. I know there's mandatory warnings all across many parts of eastern central Florida where the hurricane warnings are. And that's for a reason, because the storm surge, which is the number one hazard of a landfalling hurricane, because here's our example. 3 feet most people could withstand, but when you get to 6 feet, then it's getting a little harder. It's coming into your house and you're having a fair amount of flooding. But when you get into the catastrophic level, which is what the Bahamas got, completely covers the first floor of your house into the second floor, life-threatening. So there's reasons why these evacuations are in place. They're not there just to annoy people. They're there to help save your life. So if you're in the evacuation zone, I hope that you are heeding the call and you have listened to your officials and have gotten out of there, or will be getting out very soon. All right. That'll do it, man. I rambled for a while here. 7:25 tonight. We'll have more tonight, and I'll give you another update in a couple hours. And we'll continue our coverage here, you guys. Still hoping for that turn, but expecting that turn. Don't hear me and say that the turn's happening today in the next couple hours. It will likely be tomorrow. So the fact that Dorian stalled and is setting over there and just annihilating, unfortunately, there's no other adjective, just wreaking havoc across the Bahamas until it starts to move again, then we can pick up the timing. But I'm assuming and I'm pretty confident based on the trough coming in that we should start to see some forward movement, hopefully tonight, especially tomorrow, to get that turn. All right, let me leave you with our social media pages because I got to make sure you guys know about these. And as I mentioned, I've got some really amazing videos that came out of Abaco that shows their storm surge. So if you want to check it out, it's on our Facebook page at facebook.com/myradar. I've also got it on Twitter. That is at myradarwex. And you can follow us on Instagram. We don't have a lot of hurricane information there in the info page. I think we've had some things. I did put some forecasts in IGTV, so you can go to IGTV and check that out. And of course, you can follow us here. Okay, you guys, I think that's going to do it for now. Have a great night. I'll see you back here.